What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joannis or Joe Hatagwa. I'm a Sierra Leonean American living in West Africa. I'm in Sierra Leone right now. And if you want to know about the update, or if you want to have an update on what happened in this genocide case between South Africa and Israel, then this is the video for you. All right. We are live on all platforms. We're live on Instagram. We're live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. If you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up. And also, I want you to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Again, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up and let me know where you're watching from. I want to be able to see, and hear from you guys. So let me know where you guys are watching from, so I can shout you out and give me a thumbs up so I know you can hear me. Using my headphones so that way there's no feedback. So there's a bunch of people joining from, it looks like all over the world. So keep them coming. Let me know let me know your name, where you're watching from. All right, so we got, wow, Rocky, AKA 73. Says free Palestine. I thought you were going to say you were watching from Palestine. That's me. Cheryl is in New York. Shout out to Cheryl. Fat Money P is in Dallas. Froggers 63 says you can hear me. Cool. That's me. Cheryl says you can hear me. Erwan 42, California. Moro's in Banjul, Gambia. I was just there last year. Huli is sending love from California. Let's see. We got Italy in the house. Batis. We got Arizona. Okay, I see Arizona. Donna, where are you watching from? So we got Peaky Blinders. 27 Peaky Blinders is saying hi from South Africa. We got Chile in the house. Wow. Canada, Connecticut, Barcelona, St. Louis, Kenya, okay, Philly region, South Africa, more South Africa. Zaya is in South Africa, watching from a plane. Bianca, oh, sorry, is it Binak Newsom? Sorry, Newsom is watching from an airplane. Wow. Sunshine watching from Atlanta. Trap Tammy's watching from Maryland. Nice. Panama's in the building. Nevada, France, Mississippi, London. So what's happening? So today we are talking about the case that South Africa made against Israel for what they consider genocide. And so not only we're going to talk about the case and the case that they're making, we're going to talk about the hearing that happened just last week on Thursday and Friday, what came out of that and what's next. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get into all of that, though, as usual, I like to do a quick introduction about who I am and what I'm about, so you know what you're watching and why you're watching me. So first of all, I want to shout out Pearl Hotel here in Freetown, Sierra Leone. I'm in their penthouse suite. And they always are accommodating and allow me to stay here in this penthouse suite. So not stay here, but do my live from here. And so if you guys can see, there's some depth, there's some space there. There's a whole outside terrace back there. And the place is really, really nice. So it's set up like an apartment, but it is a hotel and residences. They've had residences here for up to six months people stay, and they've had people here for 6 years. But anyway, I just have to shout them out. I do have some content on the channel. I interviewed the manager, did a couple of tours. So if you want to see more about this hotel, you can check that out on my YouTube channel. All right. Now, let's get into a little bit about me before we actually move into today's content, because there's a lot to talk about. This situation between South Africa and Israel is interesting. Because there's been a lot of talk about genocide, right? In terms of this war between Israel and Hamas. And you know, although people had been speaking about it, there had not been one country that had taken the stance to actually apply law and come up with a case in the International Criminal Court around this idea of genocide, right? There's a lot of news people, there's a lot of, let's say, like online personalities. And by the way, there are other people who actually don't say it's a genocide, right? So there's people on both sides of the case. And so we're going to talk about what the case looks like, how they made their case, what happens next, what are the consequences, all of those kinds of things. We're going to talk about that today. And so, but before we do, let me shout out some more people because I see people joining from everywhere. We got Kenya in the house. We got Poland, Georgia. Nail Woody is in Georgia. Specs is in Ohio. Joe 707 just asked what this topic was. I just went through it, so hopefully you heard it. Nitabida is in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have Eden in Israel. Ellsworth says, what did I miss? Or Ellsworth Owens says, what did I miss? You didn't miss anything yet. We haven't gotten started just yet. We got Lewis is in Tennessee. We got London in the building. Baltimore, New Jersey. I mean, we got people from all over the world. I think we've covered at least 3 continents today. All right, cool. And let's see from the other platforms, who do we got? Okay, Robert Grissom says loud and clear from Indianapolis, Indiana. All right, cool. So let's get into a little bit about who I am, right? So, you know, if you guys might, you know, some of you who've been here before, you guys know who I am, but there are many people joining for the first time. And so I think it's always good to do like a little bit of an introduction of who I am, what I'm about, so you at least know who is talking, right? So, because that's important, right? So we're going to get into that in just a moment. And so again, today, everybody's been asking, what are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about this South Africa versus Israel court case in the ICJ. And this is a UN court, and South Africa has brought up charges against Israel of genocide. And so we're going to talk about it today. All right. So generally, I post a couple times a week. Stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're notified every time a new video comes out. Like, comment, share. Make sure you like this video. Share this with anybody you know who's wondering what is going on with the South Africa case, and share this profile. Share these videos with people who want to know more about what it's like to move to the continent of Africa, especially people who've lived in the West to move to West Africa. I lived in Ghana for 2 years, and I now live in Sierra Leone, or at least that's my current residence. All right, so I do some consulting for people who want to move to West Africa. If you want to visit Ghana or move to Ghana, I can help you with that. I got a bunch of stuff that I can help you with, or either myself or through my partners. Same thing with Sierra Leone. There's some testimonials here from people on what the consultations were like and how helpful they were to them. And so now, how to book a consultation, it's simple. Link in bio or link in description, depending on where you're watching. And you just want to click book a one-on-one session with me. You'll see it there. The information's all right there. Click on that session and we can talk. All right, so influencer services. If you guys are looking for an influencer to help with, you know, let's say, you know, doing a webinar, doing seminars, hosting an event, you know, hosting panels, I can do all of the above. I also do content services and I do in-person services. So I can post on my page and I go to places to film. Excuse me. I also do social media consulting. So these numbers are a bit outdated, but I have over 350,000 followers across all platforms on the Authentic African brand across all platforms, and with my own personal brand as well. And so with that, I can show you how to do the same. So if you have a brand and you're looking to build your brand online, you have questions about how that might work, what platforms you should be on, what topics you should be discussing, we can set up a consultation call where we can talk about that. Again, process is the same, link in bio, link in description. I also do Instagram promotions. And it's great to talk about how many people follow me across all platforms, but I think it matters more who follows me across the different platforms. So not only does Taraji P. Henson follow the Authentic African page, she also has from time to time engaged with content. So I think if you want to get in front of folks like Taraji P. Henson and the many others who are either verified or offline, have something going on outside of just the online world, people who have influence and affluence, then you can do some promotion through me. Here's what some of the different packages look like. And if you're looking for that, that's also in the description as well. So you can click on the link in the description. The top link there says advertise with us on Instagram. You can click on that link and that'll take you right to how you can fill out a questionnaire and get your stuff booked. All right. So now let's get into today's content. Now I just want to make sure I haven't missed any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. So let me just come back over here really quickly and see what we got. We got Sydney, Australia in the house. So Rafika says South Africa didn't make its case. Interesting. We'll get to that in a moment. So again, for those of you who are just joining, today we are going to talk about the genocide case that South Africa has brought against Israel. And my MiFi, just in case the power goes out, I do have to plug my MiFi in. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what the case is, what they brought against them. What is the international law around what genocide is, and a number of other things. So we're just going to walk through it one by one. And along the way, feel free to ask your questions. I will try to get to as many as I can, especially on Instagram. It's tough because, the feed scrolls so fast and there's so much. So I will do my best to be able to get to every question. Feel free to ask again if you haven't seen me get to the question in the first place, just so it shows up there at the bottom. All right, cool. All right, so let's get right into the content. So Life Mind says, are you in Freetown, bro? If so, it's advisable you stay at home between the 16th and the 17th. Yeah, so, this is someone just giving a little bit of an insight. There's some planned protests here in Sierra Leone. So that's something I'll take into consideration. Appreciate that. All right, cool. So let's talk about this case between South Africa and Israel. I mean, it's a topic of discussion for everybody these days, and I think it's important for us to talk about it. So, let's just start with what actually happened. So I think in late November, South Africa had taken Israel or had taken up the offer had set up to take Israel on in the International Court for a genocide claim. So South Africa launched its case at the United Nations top court, the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, alleging that Israel's military campaign in Gaza amounts to genocide. The case is based on a 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which defines genocide as acts such as killings committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethical, racial, or religious group. South Africa's 84-page filing claims that Israel's actions are genocidal in character and asks the ICJ for a series of legally binding rulings. Now, to be clear, genocide and the ruling of genocide takes years to be able to have that ruling. So right now, what South Africa is trying to do is just to get an immediate ceasefire from Israel. That's what they're hoping. Now, there's a couple things to take into consideration. Number one, the United Nations, many of the countries who make up the United Nations are allies of Israel and support Israel's causes right now. Number one. Number two, one of the other things to take into consideration is the United Nations has, in fact, ruled, not necessarily in terms of genocide, but in terms of other things with other nations, and haven't really had the teeth, they say, to be able to actually enforce anything that they inflict on anyone. One of the things they do well, though, is if you committed war crimes, they do try those people if they're able to find them. So they do try them, take them to court, put them in UN jail, whatever that looks like. So that has happened. That's happened here in Sierra Leone, happened in Liberia, it's happened in many places where people have been deemed to commit war crimes. But when it comes to a country and genocide and how they would actually enact any of the potential rulings, that's a difficult one to see. So just to keep, all of that in context. Now, before even they went to court, Israel had immediately rejected the filing, calling it what they called blood libel and lacking a legal basis. The Israeli government had also accused South Africa of cooperating with Hamas, which is the Palestinian military group behind the deadly attack on southern Israel. That was in October. I think it was October 26th, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. And the case is expected to lead to high-stakes legal battle in the ICJ. So that was pre the case. Now, let me just stop right there. I'll pause right there, see if there's any questions that anybody has. Let's see if there's any questions on this case in particular from anybody. Any thoughts, any questions? Let's see. So Dad's Aware says American judge will block the guilty verdict. So there's 12 judges. So let me give a little bit of insight too. There's 12 judges, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going from memory here because I actually didn't put that in this document. So I think there's 12 judges, and each country, Israel and South Africa, get to choose a judge that they want to put on the panel of judges as well. So 12 judges, one for one side and one for the other. So basically 10 judges and then one on each side. All right. So why South Africa, right? So, what was interesting is when I first heard that South Africa had this case against against Israel, I was a little bit confused as to why they were specifically the ones. Now, of course, we know about apartheid rule in South Africa, and many of the South Africans that you might speak to would say, from what they see and what we know to be true about life in Palestine or Gaza, the Gaza Strip in particular, they would say it's apartheid rule. Many people call it an apartheid state. And so, especially Israel in general. And so if that's what the case is, then it makes sense for a country like South Africa, right, who's been through apartheid, to say, we've seen something like this and we don't want to see it repeated. Now, that was just my initial guess, right? But as, upon further digging, something that I realized is that there have been some viral posts recently of Nelson Mandela. You've probably seen them, where he was in front of a crowd. I think it was at City University of New York. And there was that pretty famous, news reporter who stood up and said, do you support the folks of, Gaddafi and Yasser Arafat? And Arafat is the former Palestinian leader that you see pictured here. And named a couple of names that were deemed maybe enemies to the United States, for instance, right? And in that viral clip, what you hear Nelson Mandela said is, there was a number of different things that he said, but he said, when we were fighting for our freedom and our independence and the freedom from apartheid rule, Fidel Castro, Gaddafi, Yasser Arafat, these are all people who supported us getting our own freedom. Why would we not support them as well? Now, there were a lot of arguments as to whether or not that was okay. And in some cases, actually, at one point in time, Nelson Mandela was considered like an enemy of the state for the United States, believe it or not. And so I think a lot in part to do with his support of some of these leaders that were, you could see potentially as controversial. And so, so let me read through this because I think it's important to kind of give you guys a little bit of background as to why, South Africa might be bringing this case. So Nelson Mandela, obviously a prominent figure in the fight against apartheid in South Africa, was known for his enduring support of the Palestinian cause. He regularly raised the plight of Palestinians and expressed solidarity with their struggle for freedom. His support for Palestinians continued even after he was released from prison and became the president of South Africa. He emphasized that the freedom of South Africa was incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians and reaffirmed his support for Palestinian rights on various occasions. The direct quote to that was, but we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. So Mandela's strong pro-Palestine stance has had a lasting impact and has been echoed by South African leaders after him, including the African National Congress, which is the party that he led. And the support for the Palestinian cause has remained a significant part of South Africa's foreign policy, reflecting the enduring legacy of Nelson Mandela's solidarity with the Palestinians. So that history gives you a little bit of an understanding why South Africa would take this case up, right? So I don't know how many of you guys knew that. If you guys knew this before, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't know, if you didn't know, what do I want to say? If you didn't know, give a thumbs down. If you didn't know, give me a thumbs down. If you did know, give me a thumbs up. Because I'm interested to hear what you guys think and what you guys knew. Because I was not aware. I knew that there was support, but as someone who grew up in the States, I didn't have that much, knowledge of exactly how much and how many of the South African leaders had actually agreed with that stance. So thumbs up if you guys knew this history. Okay, so Mandeville said you knew. Okay. All right, cool. So I was not as aware as many of you might have been. So, all right. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about, so we've gone with the history. Now we're going to talk about the case in particular, because the case itself has some different parts to it. So, but before we get there, let's talk about the countries that expressed support for South Africa's claim. So several countries actually expressed support. So there was an organization, and so some people say it's strategic for many of these countries because they're smaller countries to be grouped into an organization, so that way they're not individually pinpointed or individually sanctioned or gone after for supporting South Africa's claims. So the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which has a number of different countries within it. Malaysia has also joined in, Bolivia, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Turkey, Jordan, Pakistan, the Maldives, Namibia, and Bangladesh have all joined in and say they agree. Separately from that, the Arab League also affirmed its support of the case. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, some countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, have not backed South Africa's claim against Israel. So the case obviously is ongoing in the International Court of Justice and is expected to rule on a possible emergency measures later this month. So what is the definition of genocide, right? So, okay, look, South Africa has put this charge on Israel, but the question is, what is genocide? So let me just kind of read through what genocide is according to international law, and this is from the UN. So according to international law, genocide is defined as a crime that can take place both in time of war and time of peace. The definition of genocide is outlined in Article 2 of the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which states that genocide consists of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So number one, killing members of the group. Okay, that's an obvious one. Number two, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Number three, deliberately inflicting on a group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in parts. Number four, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Number five, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Now, as you can see, there's five very specific measures that constitute genocide. And so what we'll get to in a moment is South Africa's specific definitions for each one of these and how they say that Israel has actually committed genocide. And so we'll go there in a moment. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys that heads up to what it is that is required to say that a country is committing genocide. So it is narrow and specific, focusing on the intent. That's the other thing. You have to be able to prove intent of the perpetrators to physically destroy the group. The mental elements of genocide involves the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, whatever, while the physical elements include acts listed above. Okay. So now you got an idea of what genocide is, and exactly 2 seconds, we're going to get into what South Africa's case against Israel is. Actually, sorry, let me take a step back. I think we should give you some examples of what have been prosecuted under international law as genocide. So let me just hydrate real quick. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions or comments. So a bunch of you guys knew, I'm just catching up now, a bunch of you guys knew about South Africa's history. So a couple people said nothing might come. So this is Mandeville. Boy says nothing might come of it because of the powers that exist, but I supported South Africa's stance. As a Jamaican, we stood with South Africa during its darkest hours. That's what we do. Okay, that's Mandeville's stance. So, and by the way, these are the opinions of these folks and these folks alone. My opinions are going to be relegated in private. I do not talk about my opinion on matters such as this publicly, just because they're very polarizing. And I think it's important that if you're going to talk about these things, you can talk about them at length, and you have an open ear to an audience that is willing to hear, and you guys talk about it together. So with that, I'm not going to get into my opinions. I'm just going to let you guys know what people's opinions are and just give you guys the facts. Okay, so 2 different cases that we're going to talk about today that were prosecuted under international law for genocide. So number 1 is the Rwandan genocide. So the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda has prosecuted individuals for genocide, including the case of Jean Paul, who was convicted of genocide, crimes against humanity, and violations of the 1949 Geneva Conventions. Also the Holocaust, interestingly enough. While the specific crime of genocide was not recognized at that time, because this was something that came later, the acts of the Holocaust have been prosecuted as crimes against humanity. So the Nuremberg trials after World War II addressed the atrocities of the Holocaust. So these are just a few examples of genocide cases that have been prosecuted under the international law, demonstrating the application of Genocide Convention in seeking justice for such crimes. So we're going to get into South Africa's case here now in just a moment. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any questions or comments. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to remove this comment and it's not allowing me. Oh, that's because it's a comment from Twitch. Okay, so South Africa's case, know the facts. So South Africa's 5-point case against Israel is as presented in the ongoing legal proceedings, includes the following key arguments. Genocidal acts, right? So remember, one of them had to be genocidal acts. So South Africa has accused Israel of committing genocidal acts, including mass unalivings of Palestinians following a deadly attack by Hamas that unalived 1,139 people and took more than 200 hostages. Number 2 is denial of food and medicines. The case alleges that Israel has denied food and medicines to Palestinian population in Gaza, which is considered a genocidal act under the 1948 Convention. Number 3 is physical and mental harm. South Africa argues that Israel has caused serious physical and mental harm to the Palestinian population, constituting another genocidal act under international law. Number 4 is failure to prevent genocide. The case asserts that Israel has failed to prevent genocidal acts, including killing, unaliving, and other forms of harm against the Palestinian group in Gaza. And then number 5 is request for emergency measures. South Africa has requested International Court of Justice to ensure emergency measures, while it may not be necessary for the court to come to final sentence on the genocide allegations, it could intervene based on the evidence presented. So these points form the basis of South Africa's legal case against Israel, which is being heard in an international criminal court. So that explains the facts. Let me just see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts before we move on. Sam24 December says, what about the governments who are with the US, UK, and Israel, but whose population is with South Africa? So I actually just went through that. So if you want, you can watch the replay. And I actually did go through who supported, and I also mentioned some of the prominent countries that did not support. So if you have any questions on that, you can just go back and watch the replay, because I did make sure I went through that at those particular points. So the trial started last Thursday, and then it also went into last Friday. So the first day of the trial, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in the case of South Africa's genocide claim against Israel, focused on the allegations made by South Africa. This marked the first time Israel has been tried under the United Nations Genocide Convention. South Africa's 5-point case against Israel included accusations that we mentioned previously. And so the court had set up 2 consecutive 3-hour hearings on the complaint, with South Africa presenting its arguments first, the previous day, and then obviously Israel presenting their case the second day. The stakes for Israel are high, as the court could, at a first stage, order Israel to stop war, and then in the second stage, find Israel guilty of genocide. The hearing has drawn international attention, and the case is ongoing, with Israel set to present its arguments following South Africa's presentation on the first day of the trial, which they did already. So a couple things that I observed and that I learned. Number one, I learned that South Africa actually had to build this case anticipating what Israel was going to say in their defense, because there wasn't a, I guess it's, what's it called? Discovery? Is that what it's called? In like a usual US court, where you have the two sides kind of talk about, what basic evidence there is, right? You guys kind of review it, and you understand that this is what is going to be talked about. In this particular case, in these courts, you don't need to do that. And I would imagine that makes sense, because it probably works in favor of those folks who actually put together these courts. They may not, if they're ever brought up, they want to be able to have their argument without someone else knowing what their argument is. And so in that case, I think Israel had an upper hand. And so what I think is that led to South Africa doing a couple different things. And 2 things that I observed watching a good portion of it, and then also seeing a few, kind of roundups of it from very trusted sources. So number one, South Africa went for 2 main things here: facts and feelings. Now, here's the thing. You can go through the facts, and it may be found that you cannot prove the intent. Now, what South Africa did in their argument is they argued that the intent of genocide is there. And what they did is, 2 things. Number one, they used UN numbers, the United Nations numbers, to actually to talk about what was happening. And actually, that's what I meant to share with you guys here. So give me a second, because I actually did not add that to this presentation. I just realized that now, because I think it's important to go through some of those numbers, right? Now, the numbers that I'm going to share, they're relatively close to the UN's numbers, but these are not the UN's numbers. These come from another company that's tracking these matters. But I think it's just important for you guys to see it, because you guys should see these numbers, and you can see where South Africa has kind of gotten their case for genocide. So let's see. Okay, my screen is no longer sharing, so let me go back. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to make sure that you guys can really get a full grasp of what's been going on and the whole conversation, because I think it's really helpful to have these details. Let's see. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just pulling it up now. Okay, now I should be sharing my screen. All right, cool. We're back. We're back. And can all you guys see and hear everything? All right, cool. So, they had four. So I don't know how many people they had initially. I didn't write it all down, but 4 different people got up and did more factual type, statements. And then you had other folks that were just using emotions, right? And so what I mean by emotions, they tried to use like shock and awe, right? So they used the numbers, the big numbers. This is how many people have been displaced. This is how many children have been displaced. This is how many hospitals. This is where the safe spaces were supposed to be, but then they were bombed. They talked about the 2,000-pound bombs and how many of them have been dropped just in a short period of time. I mean, they just, it's just overwhelming, right? Overwhelm you to give you like the emote feelings, to give shock, right? And then separately, they had a few people that focused on the emotions, the overwhelming, here are all the things that were done. It should pull on your heartstrings, or it should make you think a little bit, and that was the idea. Then the others, and I think it was 4 of them, just focused strictly on the letter of the law. And again, they had to assume Israel's defense because they weren't aware of what Israel had, and so they had to do their own work to figure that out. So anyway, so let's talk about the numbers here. So this is up until January 4th, which is obviously a bit outdated. It's a little over 10 days old as of the time of this this recording. So it's been about 100 days so far. And Euromed, a human rights monitor, this is the numbers that they came up with. So up until January 4th, 30,676 people were unalived. That's 12,000 children were unalived, 28,000 civilians, and 6,100 women. 58,000 injured, 105 journalists killed. 105 journalists unalived. 1.9 million displaced people. 67,000 destroyed homes. 179,000 partially destroyed homes. Press headquarters, 169 destroyed or damaged press headquarters. 318 damaged schools. 1,612 destroyed facilities. 201 destroyed mosques. 3 damaged churches or mosques, damaged churches. 524 healthcare professionals have been injured or unalived. 241 unalived, 283 injured. Healthcare facilities, 169 healthcare facilities damaged or eliminated. So we're talking about 23 hospitals gone, 89 ambulances, 57 clinics, 198 heritage sites, 167 civil defense workers. So, we're talking about like firemen, that kind of stuff. And then 2,850 people, detainees or forcibly displaced. So that is those are some of the numbers that were utilized, or some of the things that were utilized to make the case, right? By the South African team. So, and the number of unalive people is people that are presumed unalive because they were under the rubble, right? And of course, at some point, how much more do you have, and are you able to survive after something like this happens? Okay. So now Israel's case. So on day 2 of the trial at the International Court of Justice, actually, let me pause there because that was heavy, right? We just went through a lot of numbers. So I want to pause there and see if there's any questions, comments, thoughts so far. So 24 says, I'm proud of South Africa. Also says, my Twitter feed is a horror show, or your X feed, right? It's called X now, right? What are we saying on Instagram though? So let's see what the Instagram folks are saying. So that's on YouTube, Facebook, etc. Instagram. Any thoughts on any of those numbers that I shared so far? I think we're a little bit delayed, so I want to see if there are any thoughts on those numbers. So I'm just going to scroll through and see if I can find anything. So let's see. So 1425 says, what channel is this on? So it was streamed on a website. So I am going to say what happens next. I'm going to say what happens next. Sam 24 December is asking what happens next. I will get to that in a moment. But any other questions or any comments based on these numbers that are up on the screen right now? And I know on Instagram it's really tiny, it's hard to see, but you heard me just go through them. But any questions, comments, thoughts on those numbers? And we'll come back to it anyway. If you guys have any thoughts, I can come back to it because I do want to move on a little bit. All right, cool. So, so day 2, on day 2 of the trial, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in the case of South Africa's genocide claim against Israel, Israel responded to the allegations made by South Africa. They rejected the allegations, of course, stating that it was in fact Hamas, not Israel, that was guilty of genocide. Israel's legal team argued that Hamas had committed genocidal acts on October 7th, and that the degree of Hamas's entrenchment into the civilian population was unparalleled and unprecedented. Israel also argued the court's order to halt hostilities in Gaza would lead to perverse hold about 136 hostages in the Gaza Strip and prevent displaced Israelis from returning to their homes. So those were among the arguments that that Israel had made. So the question was, what's next? So the case against Israel is expected to continue with the International Court of Justice, ruling on a possible emergency measures later this month. However, the court will not rule at that time on the genocide allegations, as those proceedings can take years. So to be very clear, all this would be is an emergency ruling to ask Israel to stop, to have a ceasefire. The actual case on basically ruling in genocide could take years. And so whatever happens at the end of the month would likely be a decision to ask Israel to stop or not to stop. Basically, that's all it is. And then later on the line, we'll see how this all bears out in terms of genocide on Israel's part. So yeah, it's likely to continue for an extended period of time. The next steps in the legal proceedings will depend on the ICJ's ruling on a possible emergency measures and the further development of the case over time. So that's it. That's it for now. That is the final as to where we are right now. And that gives you kind of the update as to what was going on. I did that in 45 minutes. Can't believe it. So 24 says the numbers are probably underreported. It might be. This is an international group that tracks it. The UN also tracks it, but then again, yeah, I could see how people could think the UN might have biases. 24 said the world sat back and let slavery happen for hundreds of years. Yeah, I think this is one of those things that, much like many other wars like this, people look back on it later and have a different view of it at that point in time, right? I think there are a lot of people right now that are in the fog and they're just taking sides. I think eventually what we'll have is in a couple of years, you'll see most people will come to a general consensus on this. And I think that it's a likely outcome, much like many other things like this. There becomes a general consensus. but there are many people who are just concerned with being right in the middle of all of it, that they're not willing to take up any thoughts or ideas on the other side of it. But I do think that this will have a more general consensus view of what is actually taking place since this campaign has started. All right. Any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns from the audience now before we bring this thing to a close? You guys have Kika Moonlight, what's up? Welcome. There's a bunch of people joining from all over the place. So Curtis Flower says, what's the solution? So the solution is supposed to be an immediate ceasefire. That's at least what South Africa is asking for. The ICJ will decide if they're going to request a ceasefire, or if they're not, and rule on genocide later. But that's basically what that's the expected outcome is. That's South Africa's expected outcome, is to actually get Israel to do an immediate ceasefire. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Yes, no, maybe so. You guys are quiet today. Is this one a touchy one that you guys don't want to talk about today? I know it's one of those that you got to be careful what you say, understandably so. King Joseph says, it's been a while, my brother, checking in from Los Angeles. What's up, man? What's going on, King Joseph? So any thoughts from anyone? Anyone? Bueller? That's showing my age. That's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's a Ferris Bueller Day Off reference right there. For those of you who are older than 38, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, 24 says tragic times, bro. 24 also says the world is upside down. Yeah, I mean, look, there's it depends on what platform I log into, but there are a lot of people who are in support of Israel, and I see just as many people in support of Palestine, maybe even more. It's probably in general, there's probably more people in support of Palestine. But in terms of those who are in positions of power, or those who, who make decisions, many of those I see are in support of Israel, right? I see a lot of that, especially governments, and especially governments in the West. So that's what I've seen. That's been my observation thus far. All right, cool. Well, look, guys, I'm not going to take too much more of your time. It looks like, we got all the comments and thoughts that we were going to get from today's crowd. You guys can leave your comments in the replay. Make sure you watch the replay. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Awele got a note here for us. Palestine's original name was Judah. Okay. Always new facts being shared. I always appreciate it. Yeah, so I am super tired because I was up all night last night, not even working on this, working on something else. So I'm going to have to call it soon, but there's some questions that are in here. So King Joseph says, bro, have you traveled to South Africa? If so, what's your thoughts? Have not yet. It's on my list. It's on my list of places to go, but I haven't. 24 says, the fact that the people are with Palestine and the government are with Israel should tell you something. Well, that is one way to look at it. King Joseph said, get some good sleep, my brother. Yes. Yes, I do need to get some good sleep. And I will. I'll get a good night's sleep tonight. All right, guys. Well, look, we will meet back in the comments on the replay, whether you're watching on TikTok or you're watching on Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. I look forward to catching up with you guys on the replay. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all on the next video.